Hi there and welcome to this, the second of our two vidcasts for week 5 in new media journalism. Okay, so we've heard what Jeremy Rees at the Herald has got to say. Now let's hear from Selwyn Manning, co-editor of scoop.co.nz. Scoop being the indie-style media site that took the country by storm when it was launched with its new and original take on unmoderated citizen journalism. We started off by asking Selwyn, didn't we always use citizen contributions to our newspapers? Didn't we always value the contributions from our readers?
You know, it's really important. Talkback radio has been around for a long time, probably one of the first, maybe, but letters to the editor. I think what we can see in those areas, like letters to the editor in its most original form, are clearly ways of making sure that the consumer of the information knows where it comes from, and that's where, you know, journalists aren't getting rolled over by some sort of citizen journalism steamroller. It just challenges journalism as a profession to make sure it is actually professional and it is above it. So, like, you know, with all the raw news on Scoop, for example, the press releases and all of that type of thing, we're not subscribing to the view of where it's coming from or anything like that, but as journalists our challenge is to make sense of all that information, to be able to establish what the trends are, to make connections between where it's been, where it is now and where it's likely to head to, and that analysis approach is really high value for our audience, and that's a basic formula in the context of New Zealand domestic news that we use in the political and the foreign affairs kind of areas. So that's the challenge for journalism as a profession, I think, is to make sure, one, just to sum up, that there is a clear identifiable brand to citizen-sourced information, that from more I shouldn't say quality-sourced, but, you know, ones where the journalist is actually forging through with the information and next here with the analysis. I think that's the answer to it. You see the New Zealand Herald, you see TVNZ, TV3 News, all working now within a paradigm of opening that gate. Moderated, yeah, but you can see in the internet environment in particular, they're saying, go for it. You know, we want your images, we want your video, we want your messages.
They're often free.
Yeah, and we want, yes, exactly, so there's a commercial benefit there. But they also want the comments, and one would imagine that does help the mainstream understand its audience, perhaps for the first time in years.
There's another level of citizen journalism, someone that, if I could raise it, which is, it seems to me, anti-media. So there's one level of citizen journalism, internet-based citizen journalism, that's saying you can't trust the mainstream media. It's all tied up with corporate New Zealand, corporate America. It's in some way controlled, driven, shaped by corporate values. And here's really from the ground up journalism, because we're not even going to send our stuff to Scoop. We're going to put it on our own website.
Absolutely.
That's an empowering thing, do you think, for open democracy? You
know, I think it's really important for people to be able to express their views and their positions on various things through whatever medium's available to them. And what we're seeing is a broadening, aren't we? Instead of our physical networks of people, our associations, into being able to actually open that up to a global community of which we affiliate to. You know, the advent of indie media was one that was an exciting thing to see, and that, you know, it was embraced by the activist community, and it's a vibrant community to be able to see at any time what is coming out of that activist community. There's not a journalist among them half the time, but you know, from the point of view of that turning off of the mainstream's view on things, I think is where, you know, it's almost like people have woken up to what may have been perceived by the audience as a rock and roll swindle, you know, if pinch old Malcolm McLaren's kind of term. And, you know, and examples of that in our most immediate kind of time frame, I suppose, is, you know, the mainstream American media as the United States positioned to invade Iraq, for example, in 2002, 2003, where people seem to be able to be aware that there was, you know, I mean, I believe objectivity is a myth anyway, from anybody's point of view. Balance is another thing that's misinterpreted. I think, you know, in a journalist sense, you know, an attempt to be fair and balance with the fairness of necessity to address the public interest is a more interesting kind of dynamic to analyse. But in the United States, it seemed that any attempt toward any of those three kind of principles was actually masqueraded or replaced with nationalistic type of angle. And by and large, what we saw as an independent media is this flood of American traffic that was actually searching for what it believed was an alternative view on what was happening. And it was seeking outside views on what America was. It couldn't kind of figure it out if you looked at it from a cumulative kind of point of view. That's my opinion. I don't know if it's fact or not. But it was like it had to go outside to be able to see what its own nation, what their own nation had become in some respect.
One might argue that that's been long overdue.
Well, long overdue. And here in the New Zealand context, I suppose, we were spoon-fed going back years, particularly from, I suppose, many kind of put a juncture point as 1984, with the advent of, what do you call it, people, materialistic kind of view creeping into the culture of looking after oneself before anyone else, a lack of empathy, of being able to be in someone else's shoes, to be able to understand the impact of a cause and effect type of thing, while at the same time you could see some of the reasons for the change in the fiscal strategy. At the same time, there's obviously some major problems that were developing, and I think what we've seen is a whole generation of people kind of getting to a point by the time 2000 came along, the new millennium, and thinking there's got to be a new way. And in some ways, while it's an information revolution that started to roll over the world at that time and give people alternatives, it was kind of, I think it will be looked in the course of history as being significant, like the cultural and sexual revolutions of the late 60s. And obviously there were real important reasons for that too.
We're just on that, the internet's still pretty young.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's been an argument put out that in about 94, 96, when the internet finally took hold, half the world still hadn't made a phone call.
Yeah.
The internet appears to be this thing of the future, but we're at the very beginning of it.
Yeah.
Where do you think we're at in terms of new media, internet-based journalism? Where are we at in terms of its own development?
Its own development?
Yeah, how more can it change? Can you see the future? Can you be the seer for us today and just tell us what it's going to be like working in the Scoop newsroom in 2050?
It's a real challenge. It's hard to pick up. If we look at the directions, it is basically what we are seeing is a better use of technologies that have been around for some time. So how we were talking about in the citizen journalism context of live information coming in using a web-based thing. Opening it up might be through the telephone, or a cell phone, should I say. It might be a webcam that's booming out. But all of that has been around for some time. I just see the ability of morphing the traditional mass medias to an internet new media environment as being the next phase of it, and that being like what we're talking about with digital TV. And digital TV, and I think what we'll see is an internet experience where you're stuck behind, your computer, where the change will be where you're in a more comfortable environment should you choose to. We can also see with, the rollout now of the iPhone, that you're actually carrying a communication thing that is more sophisticated than we've ever identified before, and it's bridging should I say, it's a seamless environment between many different mediums. Where that's going, I think, I guess that if I don't pretend to be a visionary in such things, but a key to it would be to take a point like 2 years ago and a point to where we are now, and you can see a direction that it's taking, and I just think it's opening up with easier access. Anybody will be able to use because it's user-friendly, right across platform, but different ways of making sure that you can get your information when you need to at any time and any point. Holograms, who knows? That would be so cool, I think, to be able to see something that was actually in 3D, not on a flat screen, but actually in front of you. And we know that, once again, that technology's been around. Let's go read Jules Verne for some inspiration, perhaps, and